Good morning, Indiana. This week, Democrats sweep elections in the off year on Tuesday. Nancy Pelosi is retiring from Congress, and Dick Cheney is dead. That calls for a cold open. All right, welcome to Who's Left This Week, the only unapologetically progressive Sunday morning news and talk show in the Hoosier State. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers. I am broadcasting from Bloomington. I've got a couple friends here with me to talk about the week's news, but first, let me do a little bit of housekeeping. Do please be sure to subscribe to us on whatever platform you're using. If you're on YouTube, hit that bell icon, get a notification whenever we're posting new content. Do appreciate a subscription over at HoosLeft.us. That is the website. You can help us financially over there. Greatly appreciate if you do. But if you can't do that, you can at least follow us on all the socials at HoosLeft.us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky. We're at HoosLeft on all the rest. All right, enough of this self-promotion. Let's bring in our guest this week. First, Bartholomew County Democratic Party Chair, Ross Thomas. Ross, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here. Good morning.
How you doing today? Lovely Sunday. Nice out there in Columbus, or actually you're up in Indy, right?
No, I'm in Columbus.
Oh, you're in Columbus. You work in Indy. My bad.
I work in Indy. My office is in Indy. I kind of work everywhere, but well, kind of a nice, cool fall day. You know, as an old farm boy, a rainy day means a day you don't have to work so hard. So I've always been a fan of a kind of a rainy day, and Colts are winning, I think. So they're playing over in Germany, early morning game.
Oh, that's right. We got the early morning game. Well, hey, if we're not pulling those ratings this morning, maybe that's why. Well, but hey, hopefully we can lure the folks in with an appearance by the lovely Leslie Nuss. Leslie,
Hi.
welcome.
Thanks for having me back. Nice to see you.
Always good to see you. Welcome to the show. Love having you here. So listen, let's go ahead and start. We're going to jump in Indiana. We got a lot to talk about on the back end today. I really want to talk about the election results from Tuesday. We're going to spend a good chunk of the show talking about that. But first, let's take a quick trip through the headlines in the Hoosier State with a segment I like to call Around the Corn. So this week, we learned the Indiana Public Retirement System is divesting almost $170 million worth of holdings in Hong Kong following recent clarification of a 2023 Senate Act, which mandated divestment from Chinese companies. We also learned this week that avian flu has been detected in a commercial duck farm in Elkhart County, affecting over 3,000 birds, marking the 10th bird flu case in the state over the last month. Also, nuclear energy leaders gathered in West Lafayette on Wednesday at the Global Nuclear Energy Economic Summit at Purdue, where AES Indiana, one of the state's big five electric utilities, announced they would explore small modular reactors at two of their existing at two of their existing power plants. They will be doing nuclear. Along similar lines, First American Nuclear Company, Fanco, on Tuesday announced that the company intends to establish its company headquarters, manufacturing facilities, and an energy park designed to be the first operating on a closed fuel cycle here in Indiana. They did not disclose where in the state this facility will be located. Good luck finding a company that or a community that wants that in their neighborhood. Also this week, the Indiana Capital Chronicle, great publication, by the way. Everybody should subscribe to them. I get so much of the news I cover here from them. Indispensable resource. Anyway, the Capital Chronicle covered the results of a survey sent out early this year to over 500 judicial officers across the state. It found that Indiana's trial courts use, quote, largely individually set, unwritten methodologies to determine indigency. That's whether the accused are able to afford an attorney before the appointment of a public defender. In local elections, there weren't many this year, but 6 communities held school tax referenda on Tuesday, with 5 of the 6 passing. Voters in Avon, Cannleton, Duneland School Corporation, Hanover, and Lake Central districts approved of the ballot measures, renewing previous levies. Northwest Allen Community Schools, seeking a new referendum, was denied. Finally, in our quick headlines here in this segment, Indianapolis-based pharmaceutical giant Eli Lilly and Company announced an agreement with the Trump administration in a joint Oval Office announcement with Danish drug maker Novo Nordisk to cap the prices of popular weight loss medications Zepbound and Wegovy. Additionally, these GLP-1 drugs will be made available to patients on Medicare and Medicaid. Now, I want to get each of your thoughts on maybe one of those quick stories that stands out this week. But Ross, I'm not going to let you pick. I want to ask you as an attorney about the public defender thing. So they're just willy-nilly deciding who gets a public defender or not? Is that how I read that?
I wouldn't say willy-nilly. But yeah, there isn't a standard, you know, a statewide matrix or anything like that. Frankly, I don't know that there should be. You know, I'm a criminal defense attorney, so this is what I deal with every day. There certainly is not a statewide standard. In other words, in some counties, a judge, you know, will be very strict and say, listen, if you have a job, I'm not going to give you a public defender. Or if you, and sometimes it can be really unfair because look, we all hear the statistics, right? A lot of people can't afford a $400 emergency bill. Well, hiring a lawyer is generally more than a $400 emergency bill. So even working people can have a hard time, but in other places, one very, very large county in Indiana, which will go unnamed, basically you have to ask for a public defender and you get one. And that, you know, is taxes the resources of the public defender's office, and they should probably be more do more to make sure that the people who get a public defender really need one. So I think the problem with having a statewide, you know, rule is cost of living is so different around Indiana, and really the price of an attorney is different around Indiana. So saying somebody, you know, wants to hire a lawyer in South Bend is probably going to spend more money than someone who wants to hire a lawyer in, you know, Newton County. So yeah, it's a problem, but I don't know that there's an overarching solution to it. At the end of the day, we want to make sure everybody who needs a lawyer has a lawyer.
Leslie, anything in that those quick headlines jump out to you this week?
Well, I was really glad that Duneland School Corp was able to pass their referendum. You know, I care very much about public school funding, and I think that some people didn't seem to understand that with Indiana, you know, the GOP feeling like they have to fulfill on their promise to lower property taxes, that what's really going to get hurt are the schools. So the schools that asked for a referendum were really basically just trying to offset that so that they did not end up losing funds. And you know, who knows what that would have led to, closing of schools or, you know, more students per classroom, cutting out specials, which, you know, I'm a big proponent of music for all kids, especially kids with disabilities, which is what I do on Thursdays. So yeah, I think that's extremely important. And I do worry, and I just hope this ends sometime in our lifetime, this whole idea to constantly think we need to lower taxes, because what are we actually getting when we lower the taxes? You know, I'm a big fan of the Scandinavian or the Norway, Denmark, Sweden. They pay higher taxes, but they get a lot out of it. They get a robust social safety net. They get free college. They get childcare. They get, free health care, and scraping the bottom of the barrel just doesn't seem to work. And, if that's the only way they can win votes, I don't know. They're not really doing our state a favor, I don't think. So
Yeah. And I'll tell you on that last story with the GLP-1s, I will point folks to an episode of a podcast called Democracy-ish this week, where the hosts Wajahat Ali and Danielle Moody talked about this. Listen, you don't need SNAP funding. Who needs to eat? You've got appetite suppressants, right? Well, yeah. Wegovy for everybody. Listen, let's move on to our top stories in the state this week. So, last week Governor Mike Braun called for a special session of the Indiana General Assembly to consider redrawing the state's congressional maps. This is part of the president's efforts to gerrymander Republicans into a permanent majority, beginning with next year's midterm elections. So Monday, on the day the governor had eyed for the beginning of the session, members of the Black Legislative Caucus rallied in the state house to protest the move. Hoosier GOP main leaders for their efforts, reportedly still lacking the votes to ram through these maps, kicked the beginning of the special session into early December, with legislators also set to consider tweaks to the tax code at that time. Now, meanwhile, in a survey conducted by pollster Christine Matthews for Indiana conservation voters, a majority of Hoosiers said they didn't want redistricting, with 45% of voters strongly opposed. Only 39% of respondents supported the effort, but only 23% strongly supported the mid-decade gerrymander. So what we see here, as I read this, is, gerrymandering is unpopular, but the folks who don't want to see it are really, really against it, and the folks who want the gerrymandering are like, meh. So I don't know, Ross. Did I read that right?
Yeah, I think you did. It's an interesting thing because the people in Washington just want a seat or two seats, and they don't really care whether it's popular in Indiana or not, and they don't really care if the long-term result of it is bad for Republicans, which personally I think it is. But so you're talking about top-down politics, forcing people to do something that's unpopular. It's a great test, and pretty sure the Republicans are going to fail it because they have again and again and again. Like, whatever the president wants is what we have to do, even if it means jumping off a cliff. So it's not popular in Indiana. It's not popular with them. It's probably going to ultimately create more competitive districts if they try to oust Andre Carson
and Frank Levin.
The people in Washington don't care.
So listen, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, because we'll talk about sort of the Indiana lessons to be learned from this week's elections at the back end of the show. But on this redistricting effort specifically, take, for example, Leslie, if you look at Virginia this week, every district there shifted toward Democrats significantly. Now, if Indiana Republicans go through with this redistricting, they're giving up a little bit of their cushion in their safe districts to borrow Republican voters from Carson and Mervan's districts. Well, if they borrow a little too liberally, they might shoot themselves in the foot and wind up giving Democrats a potential advantage in more than just the two districts. So I would say with that, you think these guys are getting cold feet? Are they glad they didn't ram these maps through a couple months ago?
They should definitely get cold feet because it's totally wrong. It's unethical. It's cheating. It's just blatant cheating. And if 40% of the people who vote in Indiana are Democrats, we should have 40% of our Congress people should be Democrats, not 7-2 as it is now. And I really think that they are going to bring the wrath of the electorate down on them. And what I would say is be careful what you wish for, because you may end up losing some seats, because, we do have low voter turnout, but I got, a flyer from the Indiana conservation voters saying no redistricting, and they are going to bring people out of the woodwork. And we all know giving in to a bully is ridiculous. You've got this geriatric man in the White House tearing down the East Wing, putting out a sign. This is the Oval Office, because he doesn't even know where it is anymore, I guess.
In that Live, Laugh, Love font. Yeah.
And that presidential walk of fame, as if we're in Hollywood or something. Like he thinks he's famous because he's been the president. I mean, it is just insane. And I think that people have had enough of this cover up of the Epstein files. And that's why they're doing it, because they're so afraid of this damning information about Trump and other Republican donors that are in these files. And, and I think that people are getting sick of it. We're sick of it.
Yeah. It definitely, you can see the opening, and you can see where this thing could backfire if they go through with it. I want to move on and talk about what seems like every week we've got another scandal to talk about with this clown, Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith. So, hey, wait a second. We were supposed to talk about Rokita first. Oh, well. All right. We're going to talk about Beckwith first. So, this week, we got a massive dump of interview material from the Indiana Citizen. Now, they sat down with Aaron Sheridan, a former senior assistant to the lieutenant governor, for nearly 6 hours worth of interviews, and details from those sessions were published this week. Sheridan's a longtime Republican apparatchik who has worked in the state government under multiple administrations. She's a longtime serious person, a Republican with whom we would probably all have disagreements, but, in this case, she is a very good source of information. And she described the lieutenant governor's office as a quote-unquote frat house environment. She described in these interviews a February incident just weeks into the lieutenant governor's tenure, when Beckwith was issued a written reprimand by State Senate Leader Rod Bray for posting on social media during session, as well as for recording anything and anyone without their consent through AI smart glasses. Mm-hmm. She chronicled Beckwith's flippant disregard for public records laws, the way he conducted official business in a meme-saturated group chat with his closest advisors. And she also provided details around an April incident where the lieutenant governor's ethics officer and legal counsel, the kind of folks you'd expect this behavior from, obviously, showed her a topless deepfake video of one Republican state rep's wife. Now, that video, along with allegations of ghost employment, that is, staff being paid for work either not performed or they were working on private projects on state time. This has led to the Marion County prosecutor opening a grand jury investigation into the lieutenant governor's office, which we learned about last week. And Beckwith's big yap may have gotten him into even deeper legal waters. And I'm going to read extensively from an article by Abdul Hakim Shabazz for Indie Politics Now. Again, another great subscribe. Abdul, friend of the show. Great work. Keep it up. So, quoting from his article. When Lieutenant Governor Micah Beckwith called into Fort Wayne WOWO, intending to put out a political fire, he instead tossed a lit match into a dry field. What started as a defensive rant quickly became a public admission, an unverified relaying of grand jury testimony, and a guided tour through every legal tripwire a state official could step on. Beckwith told WOWO that a, quote, Soros-funded rogue leftist prosecutor in Marion County had convened a grand jury probing his office, then proceeded to describe what a staffer told him about that very grand jury interview. Now, that's the part that should make every attorney in Indiana wince. Ross, did you wince? Grand jury proceedings are supposed to be secret for a reason. To protect witnesses, the accused, and the integrity of the investigation, and under Indiana code, anyone involved in the process, including prosecutors, grand jurors, interpreters, and court reporters, is legally bound to keep it confidential. Now, witnesses aren't gagged by law, but when the target of that same grand jury goes on the radio and recounts what a witness told him, he's not just pushing the ethical line, he's dancing on it in cleats. Beckwith's public retelling could raise real questions of obstruction and witness intimidation. When the person under scrutiny publicly names the witness or even hints at who they are, comments on what they said, and paints the investigation as politically motivated, it can chill other witnesses from cooperating. Prosecutors tend to take a dim view of that, and so do judges. And then there's this leak admission. Beckwith said on air, you're not supposed to know that there's a grand jury investigation going on, but it leaked right before we go into the redistricting fight. That was a quote. That statement alone is remarkable. A sitting lieutenant governor confirming that a confidential criminal proceeding exists and speculating publicly about its timing and motives, and if the leak originated anywhere near his circle, he may have just handed investigators probable cause to widen their scope. Beckwith also suggested that the staffer who spoke to the grand jury, the employee he referenced on air, which we assume is Sheridan, Beckwith described the allegation against the office as riddled with holes. The accuser can't remember whose phone it was or who was all there, he said, and insisted his staff had been vetted to live above reproach. But in saying so, he effectively connected Sheridan to a sealed proceeding, something prosecutors can and will note when reviewing whether grand jury secrecy was compromised. And it still gets worse. Beckwith accused Marion County Prosecutor Ryan Mears of being Soros-funded, which is demonstrably false. No record exists, state, federal, or otherwise, showing Mears has ever received funding or support from George Soros or any affiliated PAC. That is not a defense tactic, it is a smear. And when a constitutional officer spreads knowingly false claims about a sitting prosecutor during an active investigation, it blurs the line between protected political speech and actionable defamation, per se. What Beckwith admitted was that Mears has full jurisdiction to investigate. Marion County encompasses the State House and all state government offices located in Indianapolis. If alleged misconduct occurs there, Mears is the one with the badge and the authority to act. Moreover, by convening a grand jury, Mears actually reduces the appearance of prosecutorial bias. The decision to indict or not rests with a panel of citizens, not the prosecutor alone. Finally, there's the time card issue. Beckwith volunteered that the grand jury ask questions about timekeeping in his office, looking into this ghost employment. And he said, they were just fishing so hard to find something that they could set us to the wall with. Have you ever lied on your time card? What about other people in the office? And in trying to downplay the inquiry, he effectively confirmed that investigators are examining whether taxpayer-funded time was properly reported, and that is not political. It is a crime if proven true. So, sorry about the long-winded thing. I thought that was worth covering all of that, and that Abdul did a good job explaining everything. Ross, you're our attorney here today. Did Abdul nail that? Did he miss anything?
Well, I don't know that I would focus quite as much on the grand jury secrecy aspect of it. I mean, witnesses are not bound to secrecy, and targets are not bound to secrecy. So, he's free to talk about it if he wants to talk about it. Now, whether it's appropriate for the lieutenant governor is a political question, and obviously, many of the things he does are questionable and show him not to be a real bright guy. The biggest concern to me is, the witness tampering, the obstruction. If you are, I think at one point he mentioned that one of the people who was before the grand jury no longer worked in his office. So, if he fired somebody for speaking to the grand jury, that would be a crime. If he's telling people actively in his office, do not cooperate with the grand jury, and if you do, you might end up on the unemployment line. That is clearly a crime. You cannot, if you know you're a target, telling your employees don't cooperate with his investigation is obstruction. I don't know that there's, I mean, at the core of it, he's not qualified to do his job. He's never been qualified to do his job. The people that he hired were not hired because they were qualified to do their jobs. It's just like the Trump administration. You know, you've got all of these agencies and jobs of people who have no qualifications to do them. So he's getting legal advice from someone who has no understanding of ethics. He's getting advice about, how to run the office from people who've never run an office before. And obviously, when you're willing to ignore the rules and ignore the law because you think you're above all those things, and you only answer to God who speaks to you personally, you can find yourself in some legal trouble. And it doesn't surprise me. It's frustrating that we have clowns running our government.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about the kind of company Beckwith keeps here, Leslie. There was another bit of news on this front this week. So on Thursday, Tom LaBianco at 24 Site News published an interview with a woman who described a 2016 incident where Life Church lead pastor Nathan Peternell, pictured there with Beckwith, their best friends, Peternell pressured the then 17-year-old and her fiance to, quote, discuss in detail how they had sex, what they enjoyed, and asked about their specific body parts in a counseling session. Peternell, then a 39-year-old father of two, is now the closest friend, confidant, and podcast co-host to the lieutenant governor. Jonathan Peternell, Nathan's 24-year-old son, was recently arrested on 4 felony charges of owning and distributing child sex abuse material. He was also found to have more than 50 videos and pictures of the elder Peternell and his wife Christina, either naked or mid-coitus, according to court records. Leslie, for all the talk of groomers, it seems the call's always coming from inside the house.
Yeah, I just find it so bizarre that these people seek power and seek fame. And, they obviously have deep psychological problems. And maybe they think by getting power, their crimes will be covered up, but they're coming to light. And they're not doing themselves any favors, but they're really corrupting the idea of who is a decent person and what do people in power how are they supposed to behave? I mean, there are plenty of good, decent, kind people who could have these jobs and have these positions. And, as Ross said, Michael Beckwith is not qualified to have his position. And, he wasn't even the one that Braun wanted as his lieutenant governor. As you remember, that was a contentious vote in their convention. But yeah, I mean, I don't know if they don't care about the rules. Maybe they do think it's that they're above them, but it's like the Wild West or something. Whatever I want to do, I can do. But that's really, most of us don't want to live like that. They obviously want to live like that, but maybe not on the taxpayer's dime. Maybe we shouldn't be paying them to live this sort of no holes barred, crazy lifestyle full of corruption. There's corruption every week with the cars and everything. People should be sick of this. They should be over it. That's what we need.
If you want to be a religious fundamentalist weirdo, whatever, I guess that's your own business. But these folks seem to have a serious child abuse problem on their hands, and that's when I get pissed off. Because it is not just yourself and your own faith at that point. These folks are harboring criminals if they are not themselves criminals. I don't know. I hope I didn't go over the line there, Ross. Do I need to say alleged or something somewhere?
Well, look, I think you're speaking generally, and look, the history of it is true. I mean, whether it's Falwell, whether it's the head of the Moms for Liberty, whether, again and again and again, the folks who are yelling the loudest about morality somehow don't think those things apply to them. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, so yeah, look, they have to explain that, but the fact is, um, it happens more often than not that those people who are screaming the loudest, have a crawl space.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, let's talk about another one of the religious fundamentalist goons running the state of Indiana, and that is Attorney General Todd Rokita. So this week, on Tuesday, after a weekend that saw 10 people shot across multiple incidents in the Circle City, Attorney General Todd Rokita called for President Donald Trump to invade Indianapolis with the National Guard troops. Rokita begged for the gross overreaction on a Twitter post by Indy FOP President Rick Snyder, a man who truly embodies the phrase, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. The Trump regime has previously sent the Guard into Los Angeles, Washington, Chicago, and Memphis, and threatened Portland with the same. Stick a pin in that. We'll come back to it later. Indianapolis Mayor Joe Hogsett, his office, issued a following statement in response, quote, "Armed troops on our streets would not make Indianapolis a safer city, and I, as mayor, discourage any request for such an intervention. Improving public safety requires listening to communities and building trust. At a time when over 100,000 Indianapolis residents are facing food insecurity, and when the cost of goods and services residents rely on is skyrocketing, when families are making difficult decisions regarding paying bills or buying their child a toy for the holidays, we are not looking for support in the form of armed troops in our neighborhoods. To further our progress in reducing gun violence, what Indianapolis needs is gun laws that make it harder for young people to obtain firearms, police with greater authority to hold problem bars accountable, and for individuals to stop turning to guns to resolve conflict. The city of Indianapolis remains focused on our gun violence reduction strategy, which has driven significant reductions in criminal homicides and non-fatal shootings in our community since 2022." End quote. Now, Ross, again, no one wants to see gun violence. We decry it. A weekend like last, where 10 people were shot, reflects badly on the city, and it puts people in danger. A person died last weekend because of that. But the National Guard to come in and take care of that seems like a gross overreaction. I don't know. What am I wrong here?
You're not wrong. Look, we say nobody likes gun violence, and obviously, hopefully, nobody likes gun violence. I mean, I think we could see when there are mass shootings. I think at one point Donald Trump said, "Get over it," So I mean, a lot of Republicans do sort of shrug their shoulders at gun violence because of their precious Second Amendment, right? That well, we can't go too far, but what this reflects is the Fox News, fear machine, which talks to rural white people and tells them that these cities that you've probably never been to are scary war zones. It's like it's like Mad Max up there. So it's easy for those people who rarely if ever go to the city and they see nothing but pictures on the news of violence, to convince them that, yeah, look, it's a war zone there, when obviously it's not. And it's all about democratic cities, even in Indiana now. Rokita, talk about unqualified for your job. He has, I don't think he's ever tried a case. But yeah, it goes back to that constant fear mongering. That's if it bleeds, it leads, and constantly telling people that that there is violence, and all the things that the mayor talked about are real ways to reduce violence. And I would also point out, if we want to start talking about that, the top 10 states for murder per capita are all red states. So it is not a blue state problem. It is not a Democratic city problem. There is violence in small town America. There's violence in Missouri. There's violence in Mississippi. There's violence in, Sweet Home Alabama. So, yeah, I think one of the things that people have to do is show those folks, if they're willing to listen, yes, there is violence and we need to curb that violence, but these cities are not, I'm in Indianapolis almost every day, and have yet to see gangs of New York.
It seems that like the only solution these folks have for anything is just more guns, more violence, more troops. It's this perpetual cycle where God forbid we address anything upstream. We don't address the root causes of violence. We don't address poverty. We don't address access to guns. It's just more police, more more than police,
Yeah.
right? We start bringing troops into the streets,
And it's never worked, right? It's never worked. You look at the war on drugs from the 1970s forward, it's never worked. But it politically, it's very easy to say to people, well, if we were just tougher, if we just got tougher, if the law, as if anybody who chooses to operate in the black market for drugs is thinking about that outcome. They're thinking about making money, and they're willing to trade that off. If they had better opportunities to make money in another way, that's something they're going to consider. But it's so easy to again and again, and we see it, and that's why our prisons are overcrowded. That's why the United States has 25% of the prisoners in the world. We used to, when I was a kid, we used to mock China by saying, "Oh my God, look how many people they have in prison. It's a police state." We
Right.
dwarf China now. We dwarf China now. We incarcerate people at ridiculous levels because politically it's so easy to say I'm tougher on crime and the solution is to be tougher, even though it's stupid and it's never worked.
right, and yeah, this is a country that's got 3, 4 times the population of the United States. If our incarceration rates were even remotely commensurate, there is no way we should have more people locked up than they do in China. Leslie, we got you back okay? Can you hear me? Can I hear
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, I can definitely
Okay.
hear you. Yeah, thanks. Sorry.
So listen, we don't want to address these root causes, but private prisons, the arms industry, capital has got to love just pouring more and more resources at our problems, right? I mean, who needs to solve anything when you can throw money at it?
Well, they make money from keeping people in prison, but the real issue is income inequality and gender inequality, oppression, all these things. If we would tax the rich and redistribute resources so that people who need help can get help, I think we would have a lot less crime to begin with. But just like, for instance, I don't know if I think it was Denmark or Finland, one of those countries had found giving people who were unhoused money, kept a lot of them, they were able to get back on their feet. Like you were talking, Russ, about how people can't even afford a $400 emergency bill. And what drives crime often is just desperation. And we need to take caring for our communities more seriously. But yes, when unscrupulous people realize they can make a lot of money by keeping people in prison. I think that's tough. That's tough. I mean, it's really like.
Oh, Leslie's fading out. So I unfortunately don't get to hear the end of that thought. But let's move on to our final Indiana story this week. And this one's tragic and unfortunate. So Wednesday, police in Whitestown responded to a 911 call about a suspected home invasion at the Heritage subdivision in Whitestown. And for the record, that just sounds like a place that's hostile to anyone half a shade darker than ivory. And there they found Maria Florinda Rios Perez, age 32, dead from a gunshot wound. The cleaning lady and her husband were attempting to enter the home for their job when a person inside shot the mother of four through the door. Apparently, the couple had the wrong address, though the husband, who could do nothing but comfort his dying wife as she bled out, insisted they were at the right house. Police have yet to press charges or release the name of the shooter, but they have been active tamping down online rumors that the homeowner in question is a local police officer. Now, this is just such a tragic story. You know, we're talking about the proliferation of guns in our society, and shit like this is what happens when we have guns everywhere and few consequences for folks who use them in incidents like this. Unfortunately, and Ross, maybe you can speak to this as an attorney. I think what you're going to find here is that this person can say, "Oh, they felt threatened." Scary brown person on my porch, and they shoot first and ask questions later. I want to be wrong. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, look, it's a defense, certainly, that a person can raise. I think if you feel like somebody's attacking you, you have a right to defend yourself. And if you feel like somebody's invading your house, you have the right to defend yourself. As I say, that is a defense. The trouble for me on something like this is if the tables were turned, I think the shooter would be charged and tried, and the shooter would be able to raise that defense. What I'm seeing here is sort of a foregone conclusion that this person isn't going to be charged. They aren't going to be named. There's not going to be a trial, and they're not going to have to raise that defense. That it's just going to be assumed that, and I don't know the race of the shooter, but I have an idea.
He lives in the Heritage in Whitestown.
Yeah. And that to me, look, I'm a criminal defense lawyer, and I would defend that person if they were charged. And that's obviously, without knowing all the facts, that's probably a defense that can be raised. But it is troubling, and you see this again and again, that in certain situations, a prosecutor will just decide for himself or herself that, well, this was self-defense. I'm not going to charge that person. Whereas, again, when the tables are turned, it's always you're under arrest, and if you've got a defense, good luck. So that's the most troubling part. And not naming the person, that I can understand while you're investigating, especially if they don't end up being charged. But somebody's dead, so to me, I'm gonna defer to the court system, and not to the police or a prosecutor deciding on their own that this is okay.
Leslie, okay, fine. You gotta, you have a weapon. You're in your home. You think somebody is coming in. Don't you have an obligation to say, like, who's there first? Or, you stand back and you wait for him to come in the door and you say, hey, what the hell are you doing here, before you start shooting? I mean, my God, man.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of issues. I think sometimes gun ownership can fuel more paranoia, or people who have paranoia would perhaps purchase more guns with the idea of protecting themselves. But then you see, for instance, media like Fox Entertainment constantly pushing some narrative of, people who are they would consider different as criminals, and you see that coming from the president, and that just fuels propaganda and misinformation. It is an absolute tragedy, and it's on all levels. And for this person to not even perhaps needing to.
Oh, a bummer. We got the kind of a poor connection here with Leslie, but I just want to say, this is a mother of four. Three of those kids are age 10 or younger, and they're.
Can I add something? Remember, I've talked to you on your
Please,
show about
Leslie.
how I had my face slashed in New York, and I went to a priest because I wasn't sure if I should go in front of a grand jury, and the priest said,
Oh, man,
they
Leslie, leave
face
us hanging there.
consequence. Kind
All
of
right. Oh,
consequence.
man. Apologize for
Well,
the poor connection.
Leslie is, I
We're
mean,
not
she
getting
hits
quite
on
everything from you
something.
there, Leslie.
Leslie hit on something that was really right, though, is, kind of like the previous story we're talking about, this constant talk about violence and fear, and you're under attack, and the country's going to hell, and everything's dangerous. Fear, fear, fear. That again, that also, this is not the first case we've seen in the United States of someone shooting someone through their door. And in all those other cases that I know about, those people are at least prosecuted. Not all were convicted, but they're at least prosecuted. So, you'd like to see that process take place.
Ross, just from a legal standpoint, can we do anything about this quote unquote castle doctrine? I mean, you should have to show a little more threat than, I don't know, there was somebody on my property before you start, coming in guns blazing.
Look, I agree. I think Indiana's prior self-defense law. Look, people ought to have self-defense. Look, you don't have to wait to get beat up to fight back. You don't have to wait to get shot. You don't have to let somebody break into your house. But what the castle doctrine, what the stand your ground, when the test becomes subjective and not objective, not what a reasonable person would do, that's where you really have a problem, where you can tell a jury, and it protects police officers again and
Going
again and
back here,
again,
friend.
where they say, well, I felt endangered, I had to act because this is how I felt. Well, look, that's an easy out, especially if you're talking about a jury that's predisposed to want to protect somebody for maybe not the right reasons, because they're a cop or because they're white or because whatever the case may be. That's my real problem with it, is when the issue is, all you have to do is say, I felt threatened. Well, look, um, it has to be reasonable, and a good prosecutor, obviously, who's trying that case, can still get a conviction. Um, a jury still has to find that it's justified, but yeah, I think overall, I'd like to go back to a reasonableness standard, not a subjective test.
Yeah. So I'm going to apologize for the unfortunate transition because I do care very deeply about this. This story is heartbreaking. But our next segment, where as we jump to our national stories and we look at our U.S. and international news through a Hoosier lens, I call this section "Who Cares?" because we're looking at these international and national stories and asking why should the average Hoosier give a damn. Let's start by looking at some of our, quick headlines from the week before we dig into our other stories. On Wednesday, a report from payroll processing firm ADP showed the economy added 42,000 private sector jobs in October, following a loss of jobs in September and expectations for more modest growth. A deeper look at the report showed all the gains coming from large companies, with small businesses shedding jobs, a potential warning sign as smaller firms are responsible for 3 out of every 4 jobs. Now, along those lines, the next day, a different report showed the economy lost jobs in October, with government and retail shedding the most jobs. The ongoing federal shutdown has delayed important jobs numbers from the federal government, but one thing we do have to go on is announced layoffs, which jumped 37% last month. Also, midweek, President Trump hosted the leaders of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan at the White House in an effort to find non-Chinese sources of valuable rare earth minerals. The same day, at the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, Senate Republicans blocked a war powers resolution aimed at preventing President Trump from conducting strikes against Venezuela. The vote failed 49-51, with Rand Paul and Lisa Murkowski joining every Democrat in opposition. In addition to the illegal extrajudicial terror strikes being conducted on alleged drug boats in the Caribbean, the U.S. military is also building up forces off the coast of Venezuela, sufficient to strike inside the oil-rich country. Virginia Senator Tim Kaine sponsored the resolution on Friday. Students, faculty, and staff at more than 100 college campuses staged a mass walkout, rallying against the Trump administration's attacks on higher education. Also, Friday, a federal judge smacked down the regime's plan to deploy National Guard troops to Portland, Oregon, granting the city and state a permanent injunction against the feds. Karen Immerget, a Trump appointee, allowed Trump to keep the Guard federalized, but found that the administration violated the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, stating that facts on the ground did not warrant the deployment. And finally, on Friday, Sean Dunn, a former DOJ employee who was arrested for throwing a sub sandwich at a federal agent during Trump's law enforcement surge in the nation's capital, was found not guilty of misdemeanor assault. Originally, U.S. Attorney Janine Slap the Bag Pirro sought a felony, but a grand jury declined the charges. The vindictive former Fox News personality pressed forward with the lesser charges, which Dunn beat in this ruling. Leslie, what stands out there to you this week?
Wow, there's so much there. But I mean, lastly, with the sandwich thing, it is just so ridiculous. The sandwich did not even become unwrapped, and so they had to tell lies. Oh, it exploded all over me, and I
I could
suffered
smell
great.
the mustard and the onions.
It is just ridiculous, right? Like, you do terrible things, somebody throws a sandwich at you, and you're going to press charges. I mean, what is this world coming to? And what a waste of taxpayer dollars holding a trial instead of just accepting that you acted like a jerk and something happened to you. Yeah, I don't know. I just consider it just, it's a whole circus, not nothing that that is helping our country. I think that the layoffs are deeply concerning, and this GOP that has, always been running on how good they are at business is really showing that that's just simply not true, right?
Yeah. They have this unearned reputation, and boy, it's hard to shake because for some reason people still think, oh, Republicans are the party of business, and yet we only have decades of information to show us that's not the case at this point. Ross, what of those headlines stands out to you this week?
Yeah, I think just to touch on the sandwich case, it goes back to what we were talking about before about having people in charge that don't know what they're doing. Janine Pirro has no business being a United States attorney, and the people at the top of the Justice Department wouldn't know a good case from a bad case because they weren't put there because they are litigators. They're put there because they are Trump loyalists. And again and again and again, we see people unqualified to do their jobs, for sure. I think also that, not passing a resolution that says the president of the United States can't unilaterally attack another country, um, you would think,
That should
would
be the
get more.
standing law. We shouldn't have to pass a resolution,
Yeah,
right?
should maybe just say follow the law. I mean, the 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 extrajudicial killing of people, I don't care if they're drug traffickers or not. Everybody in the deserves due process. Everybody deserves due process. I don't care if you are the worst person in the world, you deserve due process. And the problem is, it should be obvious that if you don't have due process, then somebody with a gun is going to decide whether or not you are worthy of due process or not, or whether you are worthy of living or dying or not. So the idea that some guy on a boat is going to decide that those guys are criminals who deserve to die, or that somebody in the White House is going to say, just, shoot first, ask questions later. It is fascist, and it is un-American. It is the most un-American thing, um, to ignore and mock due process in such a way. They're all war criminals, in my opinion, for doing those things, and I hope they stand trial for it someday.
Hey, speaking of war criminals, great segue there, Ross. Let's pour out another drink for the passing of one Dick Cheney this week. So the former vice president, who was nominally second in command to George W. Bush, but widely regarded as the brains behind the previous worst presidency in American history, died Monday from complications of pneumonia, cardiac, and vascular disease. He was 84 years old, but really came off as like 106. He was an old 84. Cheney, who led the charge to invade Iraq on false pretenses, was reviled by much of the country, who saw the oil man and defense contractor profit wildly from the illegal war. Now, in later life, Cheney, who had also served as Secretary of Defense under the elder President Bush, was a staunch critic of Donald Trump's authoritarian and anti-democratic impulses, though it should be noted that Cheney brought the unitary executive theory, the legal concept that the president has complete direct control over the entirety of the executive branch, into the popular consciousness. It is this very doctrine that Trump has used to expand his power beyond modern constitutional limits. Leslie, am I wrong for speaking ill of the dead and pouring out a drink for the passing of Mr. Cheney?
I wouldn't say you're entirely wrong. I mean, we are suffering from all the bad things that the Iraq War brought. All those pallets, remember the pallets of money, all the, it really hurt us financially as a country. It didn't really do that much to, they tried to say, oh, goodwill and everything, but there was a lot of lies there, right? A lot of lies. And it power corrupts. And right now, then, he wanted the unitary power, but okay, we're going to wield it well. But did they really wield it well? And then somebody is wielding it worse. And then he says, oh, maybe we made a mistake. Yeah, the mistake was the unitary power in the first place. And just this cowboy, I know what I'm doing. I'm from the West, and, boom, 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 we're going to shoot him up. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it's time to just put that to rest and be a real democracy and join the sane nations, regain the sane nations. rejoin.
Ross, I have a theory, and it's that this country kind of you can trace the line from Obama taking power in 2009 and saying we're not going to look back, and failing to hold the war criminals of the Bush administration responsible. You can draw that line straight to Trump now, where it's like, oh, we're just doing illegal shit and we can get away with it. I don't know. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, look, I absolutely. I think that has always been a mistake. The political consultant class telling people, "Hey, don't focus on the past, focus on the future. Let's not talk about the past." When the past, look, what happens in Germany if you don't have Nuremberg trials? A lot of those guys walk out and join the Munich City Council. That's what happens.
Or NASA.
Yeah, well, that too, but those guys weren't tried at Nuremberg. Those guys were
They
paperclipped
were
over
useful, right? Yes.
to the United States. But if you don't hold anyone accountable, obviously no one is going to learn from their own mistake and say, "Boy, I hope we never do that again." That never happens. So absolutely, it was a mistake not to hold them accountable. I think it's it's kind of funny that a guy like Cheney gets credit for not being a Trumpist, to not being a full blown fascist, like out loud fascist. And I guess that somehow rehabilitates him along with his daughter, that, hey, at least you didn't go along with what the terrible people did. But, well, that's a pretty low bar. And it certainly doesn't take away. You're exactly right. Look, the unitary executive theory of Dick Cheney and John Yoo and all of the people in the Bush administration is a direct line to the people in Trump's administration saying, if the president does it, as Nixon famously said, it's not illegal, and so we can really do whatever we want. And I've said many, many times, our courts do not have an army. So much of our legal system is based on respect and norms that um, that can go away. We respect legal rulings because that is what we do, not really because we have to. And that's the scary thing, is that judges can say this is illegal, but much like Wyatt Earp in Tombstone. If Wyatt Earp says, "I don't think I'm going to let you arrest me today," and he walks off, well, there goes the rule of law. So, yeah, Cheney, I don't look. I guess there's some credit for not being a complete fascist during the Trump administration, but I mean, he's responsible for a lot more dead people than Trump. That's for damn sure.
So far.
Well,
I mean, Leslie, what do you make of the late in life Cheney face turn? I'm of the opinion that if the Cheneys, Dick, Liz, Lon, whoever, really, if they really wanted to see Kamala Harris win in 2024 last year, the best thing they could have done was shut up.
Yeah, possibly. I think that perhaps Dick Cheney later in life had time to reflect, and maybe I do think sometimes power is like sharks at a feeding frenzy, and having all that power it can be very corrupting. And so just coming up with rationalizations for all the bad decisions that they make, but then later in life reflecting, and then maybe he's obviously a smart guy and maybe did spend some time going, oh, wow, these are the things that happened. But you're right. It's about holding people accountable. And I think, unfortunately, sociopaths and psychopaths, if you don't hold them accountable, they just go, great. I can just keep on criming and keep on doing this. And, fawns all
Yeah.
over them, and they don't learn anything. And I think that's part of the problem, is that we have fawned over people in power for far too long. And these people who are doing these horrible things, they should not be enjoying peace of mind when they go out to restaurants or the theater or church or somewhere. You know, people, they
Or
should not be
hunting with
held
their
up.
best friend, or yeah. Let's hear it for the guy that shot Dick Cheney in the face, by the way.
No,
Dick
Dick
Cheney
Cheney
shot
Oh no,
shot the
Dick
guy
Cheney
in
shot
the
him in the face, and then
then he
And that
he
guy
had to
apologized.
apologize for being in Dick Cheney's way. Yes, yes. Oh man, yeah. Here's the thing about these folks, like Cheney, like Mike Pence, for example. Like, listen, I'm glad you didn't drive down Fascism Avenue, but you paved it, man. And I don't think you get any credit for that. Hey, speaking of luminaries of their generation riding off into the sunset, let's move over to the other side of the aisle and talk about Nancy Pelosi. So, the former House Speaker announced this week that she will not seek re-election in 2026. Pelosi, 85, was the first woman to serve as Speaker of the House and served as leader of the Democratic caucus in the lower chamber for 20 years. First elected to represent her San Francisco district in 1987, she ascended to the Speaker's chair following the Blue Wave election of 2006, in response to Bush and Cheney, by the way. She held the gavel for 4 years before Republicans retook Congress, assuming the position again in 2019 after another Democratic wave. An effective vote counter and caucus wrangler, Pelosi is credited with delivering the passage of the Affordable Care Act during the Obama presidency, as well as infrastructure and climate legislation during the Biden administration. Now, Pelosi served as a useful target for Republican attacks during her tenure, but also drew criticism from the left flank of her own party for allegations of insider trading, anti-China warmongering, throwing progressives under the bus, and hanging on entirely too long. Leslie, Nancy Pelosi means a lot to a lot of women as the first Speaker of the House, or the first female Speaker of the House. What does Nancy Pelosi mean to you?
Well, I think that you're right. She has done a lot of amazing things. And I do think, sadly, that part of her legacy will be tarnished by the insider trading and maybe just starting to blur lines of what is ethical. But yes, the Affordable Care Act, she's very, very knowledgeable. I actually was in a room during the last DNC last year, and she was speaking, and it was very impressive to listen to her. I mean, she knows her history and how it all relates to everything. I was a little disappointed. I don't think she was supportive enough of AOC, who I do believe is just doing amazing work, especially to educate younger people and to keep democratic values alive. Yeah, she deserves a lot of accolades. No one is perfect. I would prefer that they banned, Congress from trading stocks, because that just does um, make an air of impropriety. Like, I guess, like
Such
Marjorie.
an easy one, too, right? Like,
Yeah,
it should be so easy to get behind that.
yeah. I mean, you can't take it with you. I even heard Marjorie Taylor Greene went from what, $750,000 to $25 million, and it's just, I mean, we want some people who are decent and ethical and know when enough is enough. And but I think greed is very challenging. It's something that's not talked about enough, but we do need to rein that in for sure, definitely.
Very much like Cheney in a way. Like, once you get into that center of power and you have all these tools available at your disposal, very tempting to use all of them. Ross, what do you think? I mean, listen, Pelosi, regardless what you think of her, very effective at her job. Yes.
Oh, yes, very, very effective at her job. I mean, the only regret I think she would have is perhaps not not being bolder at times. We as Democrats have oftentimes been cautious when we should have been bold. I think back to the beginning of the Obama administration, where we had 60 votes in the Senate and we had a majority in the House. Um, and yeah, look, a couple of those Democrats were Ben Nelson and Joe Lieberman, but nonetheless, um, I, it was a period of time when we could have been bold and done a lot more. I don't put that all at the feet of Nancy Pelosi, but again, I think if anything, you could look back and say there were times when we should have been more bold. I think Democrats, unfortunately, continued for a long, long time uh, to still play politics the way it had been played, and not realizing that the
And
Republicans
we're
were
still
playing.
doing it many places,
Yeah,
yes.
that the Republicans are playing a whole different game, and they're not willing to play ball, and they're not willing to do the things that traditionally have been done. And I think it took a long time. I hope we're seeing in this shutdown now that maybe we finally learned that you've got to fight fire with fire. You cannot take the high road when the other side is stabbing you in the back. But obviously, a great speaker, and was a great vote counter, a great whip. Those are very important things in governing. And her legacy really speaks for itself.
Leslie, what do you think about current speaker, or well, not speaker, current House
Yeah.
minority leader Hakeem Jeffries is her hand-picked successor. Um, a lot of folks over here on the left are extremely displeased with Jeffries. View him as a kind of a corporate puppet, a sellout, an APAC guy. Um, did Pelosi hang on to power too long, and in insisting on a hand-picked successor, is she still holding on to power too long?
Yeah, there's some issues. I mean, I do listen to him. Sometimes he sounds very fiery and sometimes he's a little reticent. I think, the qualities that get you elected and get you popular with your colleagues aren't always the traits that make for a fiery leader. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a case to be made for maybe a mandatory retirement age. I do think that people are reluctant to step down because they know that they will win. They have ascended ranks where they're the top of certain committees and they have influence, and I'm sure many of them have very good intentions. They think, well, at the top of this committee, I can influence policy or I can do this good. But, we're killing ourselves because we're not, building a bench, which I think we find all over the country. We need more younger people, bring them on sooner. But yeah, I think saying I
Oh,
have heard him speak up, and I don't know. I don't. I just wish that there was somebody who was even more forceful, I suppose. More
yeah. Ross, let me ask you this. With Pelosi, San Francisco, Jeffries from New York. Again, look, we're Democrats. I know where the base of our party lives, and that's fine. But would it be better optics? I remember Tim Ryan challenged her for leadership in the House a few years back. Would it be better optics for Democrats to have maybe a Midwesterner or somebody from the interior of the country as the nominal leader of the caucus to just sort of diffuse those Republican talking points?
I mean, possibly. I think if they would just move on to another talking point, frankly. If someone in the mold of a Paul Wellstone was the leader, then I would say, yeah, for that. But I don't know that it's necessary. If we have a leader who's in a place where they're going to get reelected and they're in a stronghold, I mean that's probably a good place to have a leader. Again, I think as Leslie said, you'd like to see people be more bold, and understand that, when you talk about Tim Ryan, I mean, honestly, with all due respect to him, I mean, he was bucking because he thought the party was too progressive and that he wanted us to be much more Republican light. And I'm obviously very much against that. I think people should run as who they are, and I think conservative Democrats can make their case absolutely, and take that to the voters. But as a party, um, you know, we're not Republicans. We're not Republican light. We believe in the New Deal. We believe in a progressive government, and that's what our party stands for. So, that kind of a challenge that, hey, we as a party need to be less progressive and more apologetic and more, hey, we like Reagan too. I'm not on that. I'm not on that bus at all.
Yeah, for sure. So during her tenure in Congress, Nancy Pelosi saw lots of government shutdowns, and this week we broke a new record with the current shutdown becoming the longest ever. So the previous record was set during Trump's first administration, but Wednesday, after a shellacking at the polls, which we'll talk about here shortly, the president admitted in a meeting with Senate Republicans that their party is being blamed. As such, he pushed for leadership in the upper chamber to eliminate the filibuster. He received support on this front from Indiana Senator Jim Banks, who went on Newsmax to argue for GOP maximalism on all matter of legislation. Now, one of the casualties of this shutdown has been food aid, which we've been, tracking consistently here the last several weeks, with the administration refusing to fund SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Aid Program. That is food aid for children, the elderly, and the disabled. And Friday, the Supreme Court, in a decision written by Ketanji Brown Jackson, of all people, granted the regime's emergency appeal to block a lower court order to fully fund the program. Now, a judge had given the Republican administration until Friday to make the payments through SNAP, but the administration asked an appeals court to suspend any court orders requiring it to spend more money than is available in a contingency fund, and instead allow it to continue with planned partial SNAP payments for the month. Now, a couple Indiana angles on the shutdown that I want to throw in here. So, a health agency in the state, this is from the Capitol Chronicle. The Indiana Department of Health is facing furloughs because of the shutdown. And in Indianapolis, the airport is among 40 to be impacted by the FAA's capacity cuts and flight cancellations. So, Ross, I guess, what jumps out to you in the shutdown this week? I'm particularly concerned that Justice Brown Jackson is the one writing this opinion.
Well, I wouldn't be, honestly. She actually did a good thing. If you understand the procedures of the shadow docket and the way it works, it goes randomly to a justice. And if the justice doesn't rule upon it, the rest of the justices have an opportunity to overrule them, essentially, and go en banc, or have all of them decide. What she did was, yes, she granted it, but she put a time limit on it. She said you have to get this done expeditiously. If she had not done that, if she had said I'm not going to grant this stay, then Alito would have said, well, I am, and I'm going to make it I'm not going to put any time limits on it. Take all the time you want to figure it out. And then they would have dragged it and dragged it and dragged it in the court. So I too, when I saw that initially, said, what the heck? But if you look at it logically, she did really the best thing she could do in that situation, which is, yes, I'm going to grant your stay, but it is a limited stay. And she put parameters on it that the fascist wing of the Supreme Court would not have done. So it all made sense when I looked at it that way.
Oh, well, thanks for clarifying for me. That I guess assuages some of my concerns. Yeah. But Leslie, I mean, SNAP is still not being fully funded. People are not receiving their benefits in a timely manner. Some people aren't receiving them at all. Like folks still need to eat. No.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that hunger is a real concern, and a lot of children are negatively impacted by this, and weaponizing hunger and weaponizing the poor to get your ill gains, which is taking the health care or, making the premiums rise and shutting down the government because you're hoping that the Epstein file issue is going to go away, which it doesn't look like it's going to go away. They need to have a come to Jesus moment and get this all out in the open, and because it's never going to go away. I don't think it's ever going to go away, and it shouldn't go away. It is a crime, and I sit here during the week and think, what is it about accruing so much money that makes these rich men want to violate every ethical and social norm that we have as a species, and to do these things to children, and then to just think they can just throw money at the issue and it goes away. And they have too much money. They have too much money, and they need to, start acting like a real human being. And Mike Johnson, who never had to run a competitive race, who basically was shoehorned into his position. Again, like you say, Ross, not qualified to do his job, just doing what this old demented man who can't even find his way to the Oval Office, who falls asleep during meetings, who stands up when somebody's having a seizure and wants the attention back on himself. I mean, what is the GOP's legacy going to be? They could turn this ship around if they, and they need to. They need to, or they're going to be thrown overboard eventually.
Yeah. Well, okay. So obviously, the Republicans, are blaming us, the Democrats, for this shutdown, saying, well, Democrats are withholding votes in the Senate that Republicans need to reopen the government now. Friday, uh, Senate Majority Leader John Thune swatted down a Democratic offer to reopen the government and extend the expiring healthcare subsidies for a year, calling it a non-starter as the impasse continued into its 38th day. The Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, made this offer to reopen the government on Friday, as Republicans have refused to negotiate on these demands. So, what you have here is Democrats are refusing to give the Republicans their votes unless the majority party extends Affordable Care Act subsidies to keep people's health insurance premiums at a reasonable rate, and even that is a stretch. So it is, let us jack up the price of your health care, or we will starve you. I mean, these are basically the parameters of this negotiation. So I guess with that, Ross, I ask, I mean, should the Democrats here you see Schumer, floating, offering an olive branch? Should the Democrats hold firm, or should they roll over on this? We've seen some quote unquote moderate Democrats like John Fetterman, like Alyssa Slotkin, in there pushing to reopen things now and negotiate later. What do you say to that strategy?
I hope John Fetterman is never going to be leading policy for our party ever again. Number one. Number two, I obviously the answer is hold firm. And it is refreshing to me as a low level, county guy here to see that the consulting class is being ignored. Because I guarantee you the consulting class from the beginning has said, you got to fold, you got to fold, you got to fold. You're going to get blamed. You're going to get blamed. And in the past, we've seen again and again and again where bold leadership was needed, that caution was taken. Again, because political consultants and people of that ilk have really misread the room. The reality is what people want is people that will stand up for what they believe in, where people will not cave to extortion. That's not what people want to see. And look, yeah, you can go to somebody who's ill-informed and say, oh, the government doesn't want to feed people, the Democrats don't want to feed people, or what. People want you to stand up, and you can't be extorted. So I think it's clear we should stand our ground. I think that, look, if you want a compromise and say let's do this for 6 months or a year, that's a reasonable compromise. Well, okay, we'll figure it out later. But to say we'll just capitulate, give you what you want, and then hope that I've actually seen that from a couple of people say, hey, just go ahead and agree and then negotiate.
Yeah.
Well, that's the stupidest thing
Oh,
I ever heard. The only leverage you have is that they need your vote. So
right
obviously
now.
you can't do it. So I think it's a good sign for the health of the party that we're standing our ground, and I hope it continues.
And Leslie, like in Tuesday's elections result, which we're going to talk about in just a moment here, are any indication, Republicans are getting the blame for this. Are they, as our Senator Mr. Banks suggests, are they going to go ahead and press forward with eliminating the filibuster to open the government back up, or do they need to keep the filibuster so they can avoid doing any actual real work?
Yeah, I don't I just think that Jim Banks wants to eliminate the filibuster for this, but then of course, when the Democrats have power, they're not going to like that. It is eliminated. But the real issue, yeah, it is power, and we do not need to cave. We've been caving and being kind and trying to be understanding, and they've just been railroading us for far too long. And just remember, John Thune was one of those senators who went over to Russia on the 4th of July. So I don't know, I don't want anybody to forget that. But what I think too is that the Republicans have just done their dirty tricks one too many times. You can't fool all of the people all of the time. And now the people have been seeing with the protests, it is the time to stand up. And they see this obscene wealth inequality, Elon Musk possibly becoming the world's first trillionaire. For what? And it is just absolutely absurd. We need to stand up. People are standing up. They are going to continue to stand up. And we are going to fight for our democracy, because democracy is the best option that we have, that the majority of the people have.
And despite concerns, I think from many folks, and again, we'll see how this plays out over the next 12 months going into the midterms. But democracy worked well on Tuesday. So let's talk about this year's off-year elections. Tuesday, a huge night for Democrats as they sweep just about every race imaginable, running up the score in a lot of places. In Virginia, Abigail Spanberger was elected governor in a rout. This comes alongside wins for the rest of the Democratic ticket. State Senator Ghazala Hashmi won the lieutenant governor's race. The former Jay Jones, former delegate, won the attorney general's office, like by 5 points, despite a scandal roiling him, where he joked about political violence in some text threads. So even he won his race pretty convincingly in Virginia. Now up in New Jersey, in the contest that drew national attention as a gauge of the Trump administration. Mikey Sherrill won the governor's race there in what was expected to be a much closer race than it was. She wound up winning by like 15 points this over State Assemblyman Jack Ciattarelli. Across the Hudson in New York City, phenom Zoran Mamdani, the Democratic Socialist, was elected mayor of New York City, capping a stunning ascent for the 34-year-old who ran on a platform of affordability, defeating longtime Democrat, former governor, and son of another former governor, Andrew Cuomo, as well as the Republican Curtis Sliwa. And he won on the first ballot. They have ranked choice voting over there. He finished above 50% on the first ballot. And with his win, the Democratic Socialist will become the first Muslim mayor in the city's history, the first of South Asian heritage, and the first person born in Africa. He will also become the city's youngest mayor in more than a century when he takes office on New Year's Day. And finally, not finally, there's others, but the other big race on Tuesday was out in California, where Governor Gavin Newsom's measure Prop 50 was approved by 30 points, overwhelmingly. This was an effort to override the state's independent redistricting commission in order to redraw their congressional maps in response to all of the gerrymandering states like Texas and Missouri and maybe Indiana have been doing here over the last several months. That pushed that won by a lot. There were some other races. Democrats maintained control of the state Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. There were some mayor races in big cities. I want to say J.D. Vance's half brother or something was running for mayor of Cincinnati, and he got blown out, like embarrassed badly. So I guess I want to ask all of you, first of all, what are your takeaways from Tuesday's elections? Which race stands out to you? And furthermore, what can Hoosiers learn from Tuesday's elections as we prepare for next year's midterms? Let me start with you, Ross.
Turnout. That's what I take is the key to Democratic victories is turnout. You look at New Jersey, which was polling at some points within 3 points with a unapologetic Trump candidate on the ballot, leaning into Trumpism. And the reason and he lost by double digits. It was not a 3-point race. And the reason is not because a bunch of people changed their mind on the last day, but because the polling models had a certain turnout figure, and the Democrats blew that out of the water. And one of the reasons was turnout in northern New Jersey, which is the blue part of the state, was very, very, very high. And the other thing in New Jersey in particular was the Hispanic vote was much higher, and it went overwhelmingly for the Democrat. And actually, there were counties where Trump had won the Hispanic vote just 2 years ago. In a couple of New Jersey counties, he had won the Hispanic vote by a couple of points. And that was reversed completely, again, by higher overall turnout and by losing that Hispanic vote. So I think enthusiasm in Indiana, as we look at it, that's always the key for victory in Indiana, especially in areas where we don't have the majority, and that is we have to have overwhelming Democratic turnout, and independents have to lean our way overwhelmingly, and then we also have to have Republicans being depressed. The one thing that we see again and again and again is when Trump is not on the ballot, a lot of Trump first voters don't vote. Um, we saw we saw that in 2018. It's sort of the opposite of that when Trump came to Indiana to stump for Braun in that Senate race. He came here multiple times, and we saw turnout go really high in Indiana. We weren't part of the wave, and part of the reason was because Trump spent so much time here campaigning for Braun. He's not going to come here to campaign for Jefferson Shreve, and he's not going to come here for Aaron Houchin or any of those folks or Victoria Spartz. Trump's not coming. So we have to look at that and say, will those Trump first voters care? Probably not. That's going to depress that Republican vote. So somebody like me who's looking at these numbers said, hey, look, let's use that Obama model. Let's get massive turnout among Democrats. Let's allow Republicans to be depressed, and we can win some of these things. So it's exciting, and it does apply. Look, Virginia is not, if we had the turnout, we have the lowest turnout in the United States. We have to remind people again and again and again, we have the lowest turnout in the United States. If we had the turnout that they have in Virginia, we would be Virginia demographically. So yeah, it's exciting.
Well, I just can't get the picture of like Trump and Shreve campaigning next to each other. I would think Trump would want to appear next to Shreve because it would make whatever the hell that thing on his head is look better in comparison. Now, Leslie, what's your big takeaway from Tuesday's election? Which one of those races stood out to you?
Well, I really liked Mom Donnie because I think he ran an amazing campaign, just happy, confident, and he had fun. And that's what people needed. When I campaigned, I talked about like the loneliness epidemic, and he gave young people something to do. They did a treasure hunt. I mean, I didn't have quite the same thing. I would have like a coloring page of an Indiana native species give to kids. But I think giving people something, making it a little bit more fun is important. I think something that hurts us for sure is straight party ticket voting. And I have a friend who lives in Illinois who said that if we didn't have that, she thinks I just might have won because we talked about the laziness factor of people just going and checking maybe Republican. They wanted Trump. They couldn't, maybe they met me, but they just couldn't be bothered to spend 3 extra minutes in the booth and vote for me. And that is something that I think that all the candidates can and should address on their literature and on their door knocking. I think that if I run again, I will definitely do that. Um, and I think that we do need to, explain to these non-voters, if you turn out, I could win. If you turn out, I could win. We really do need you because I did find reluctant voters, and I wasn't really sure that they would go to the polls, but they seem like good, kind people. And I did find younger people who'd say, or anybody who'd say, oh, I'm not involved in politics. And I would say, you may not care about politics, but every single aspect of your life has something to do with politics, from how fast you can drive, what kind of car you can drive, where you can live, who you can marry, how much wage you get paid, what the minimum wage is. And I think people need to understand that connection. But yeah, I think that focus on community and that we can do it. We can be like Virginia. we can do this too. Because I think, yeah, Indiana has had a lot of demoralization after Obama was elected. The GOP wanted to make certain that that didn't happen again. And they heavily worked to gerrymander and to do voter suppression. And we're going to have to do some, reversing of that. But there's the truth of the matter is, like Ross said, a lot of people don't vote. And maybe they will come back out. We can hit them with images of the White House being destroyed. And I mean, I think that that's just a good visual because that was so shocking. I think other people want to absorb a lot of things. Oh, okay, so this isn't so great, but I can live with it. I can live with it. And yeah, I think that this wave is going to hit the whole country. We're all fed up. We're fed up.
You made a good point about folks not being into politics. I always like to say you might have been into politics. Politics is into you.
Yeah.
Ross, are people into Gavin Newsom? We haven't talked about this one. So over in California, listen, this Prop 50 thing, it's kind of wonky. It's about gerrymandering. It's a process vote. I mean, and really, like even a lot of Democrats and find it distasteful. I mean, he's asking the voters, "Hey, let us cheat the same way Texas cheats," and they did. The folks came out for 30 points for Prop 50. Is this a testament to the popularity of Gavin Newsom, and does it put him in a position to be the Democratic front runner if you look out to 2028?
I think it was not that hard of a sell to people to say, look, you see that there's cheating, blatant cheating going on. What are we going to do about it? Are we going to wring our hands and say, I can't believe those guys are cheating again, but we're above doing anything untoward? Or are we going to say, look, until we're not going to disarm unilaterally. If you're going to do that, we can do it too. And we didn't start it; you started it. And I think it's not that hard for people to understand. I mean, if you look, unfortunately, Democratic states have again and again and again. The reason California is in that position is because Democratic states have disarmed and said, well, you guys may gerrymander, but gerrymandering is so bad that we're not going to do it. We're going to ourselves have a commission and we're going to have fair maps. Well, guess what? You're going to lose nationally because you're playing fair. Meanwhile, the other guys don't give a damn about being fair, and you're just standing by. So, well, look, we're above all that. The hell we are. We're not above all that. We've got to play the game under the rules that we have, not the rules we want. So I don't think it was that hard to explain to voters that what they were doing and that they were fighting fire with fire. Look, I think Gavin Newsom, we'll see. I think Gavin Newsom brings a lot to the table. I think, for me personally, I'd like to see a little more sincerity, perhaps, on some issues, and I think there's some opportunism there that kind of gives me Clinton flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
That's really not. Again, I'm a Wellstone guy, right? I want somebody who's going to stand up and say exactly what he thinks, whether it's popular or not. And for me, and again, it's early and nobody cares what I think anyway, but I think J.P. Pritzker is somebody that I've heard speak, that I've met, that he is staunch in many of the things that he believes in, and obviously is a guy that can't be bought. So I like him. There's a lot of people I like. I like, and I wouldn't turn away Gavin Newsom, but I don't know that this referendum is really about his popularity so much as it is about people rejecting, uh, blatant cheating in Texas.
Yeah.
I think people are sick of Texas. I think people are sick of the corruption in Texas and the way those people behave. I think they're sick of it. And Californians also saw Trump's response to the wildfires and the blatant disregard for the people and his, idiot spousings about the water and trying to blame everything and withholding help. And I mean, I think that they were just fed up. You're right. And they have a lot of power, right? They're one of the largest economies. And yeah, they should have a say. And they are.
Let me tell, yeah. About these on the redistricting thing, and there's a tie-in. I want to bring this back to Virginia, which is sort of where we started, because under the radar, Spanberger won by a lot, and we could talk about whether that is the direction of the Democratic Party in the future, or maybe the Mamdani direction. That's kind of the big conversation happening this week in Democratic circles. But under the radar in Virginia, I think the biggest thing that happened was their Democrats routed Republicans in their state assembly, the House of Delegates, they call it there in Virginia, picking up like 13 seats. I think Democrats are on pace to like win 64 out of the 100 seats in the Virginia House of Delegates, and that's massive. And this is they've been talking about redistricting in Virginia as well. This past session of the assembly there passed whatever legislation they needed to. They have to do it 2 sessions in a row in order to redraw their maps. So with that on the table, Republicans knew this was coming. People who were against the redistrict there knew this was coming. Democrats landslide in the assembly there. And I think it's really important, and I hope to connect with some of these. Our good friend Michelle Higgs of the Indiana Rural Summit has some connections with folks out there in Virginia, and what they did in running their races, they sort of bundled swing races with maybe other lesser races in that geographical neighborhood, and the momentum of pairing these races, sort of having these folks work together as a team, really helped push turnout up. And a lot of those folks that maybe they weren't in the races that you thought were going to flip, they got pulled up too. And you have this, and I think this is something that maybe Indiana Democrats could learn from in this cycle. And Michelle's maybe working on putting together some of our folks with their folks and see if we can't coordinate something. I hope to get a chance to talk to them too. But is there anything else like kind of down ballot that jumped out at you, Leslie?
I do think Virginia was very inspiring, and the people have the power. Patti Smith said that. She has a great song about it, and I think the Republicans have always known that their policies are unpopular, but they have been able to finagle their way into majorities where they really shouldn't. And we know that they could be more popular if they would moderate and modify their policies, which they don't want to do. So it's only going to take getting turned out of power. So yeah, I just thought, yay, Virginia, how inspiring for the rest of us. And Mississippi too. Mississippi.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I forgot
Love
all about that one. Mississippi Democrats, I want to say, flipped 3 seats or something. It doesn't sound like a lot, but they broke the Republican supermajority in that state house. And boy, if Hoosier Democrats could do the same thing next year, we need 4 seats at the very least. If we can break that supermajority, we can keep them from doing the worst of the worst. Ross, what's the Hoosier angle from Tuesday's election? How are you tying Tuesday's results back to lessons that Indiana Democrats can maybe take forward as we organize for next year?
Well, I think Mamdani's campaign, not really. I mean, the message was great, right? The message was about affordability, was about working people, was about problems that people face every day. So the message was great. But for somebody like me as a county chair, the process was great, right? They were out in the community, thousands and thousands of people volunteering, going and knocking on those doors, knocking on over 1 million doors in a city of 7 million is a huge, huge undertaking. And it's very, very effective. So, you know, remember, it's not, you can say, well, look, he's the Democrat and he won. What does that really show? And that's sort of been the Republican take, right? Oh, well, it's not really news that a Democrat won in New York. Well, look, he came from 1% at when he first decided to run as a state assemblyman at with a funny name and a Muslim background. He started at 1%. But with that message, but also sending that message to the people, getting out and knocking on those doors, sending out those text messages, getting people in the community involved. Oh, I've gone sideways. How nice. Oh, there I am. You know, that's what I would have Democrats in Indiana do: the hard work, get out and you know, make a commitment to do the hard work and not just sit back and say, I'm glad you guys are doing that. Good for you. It ought to be, what can I do? You know, let's get out and talk to people. Let's get out and have a message. Um, and it works. And again, I'm not so much about convincing a hardcore MAGA guy to abandon MAGA. I think that's a heavy lift and probably not going to happen. But for every one of those guys, there's 2 or 3 people that probably haven't even voted that you can get out and say, listen, you need to get on board. That's an easier sell. That's what I'm about, you know. So yeah, I think showing in all of those races that it's enthusiasm and turnout, um, and getting out there that works.
Leslie, a lot of folks, I think, on our side of the aisle, we're trying to figure out what this thing means. We saw the big win for a Democratic socialist like Mamdani in New York. Well, meanwhile, in Virginia, we saw a big win for more of a centrist Democrat, a former CIA agent in Abigail Spanberger. Listen, she won by more. Does that mean that is what we should do? We should nominate more Abigail Spanbergers and more Alyssa Slotkins and more cops to be our Democrats?
No, I think, kind of what Ross was saying. I think we need to nominate people who have convictions and who are passionate. We are not a monolith, and a coalition of people who have good ideas is really what we need. We see too many of the Republicans, they just all vote, in a block, and doesn't matter what their individual convictions are. But we need some real solutions and people who are smart and creative and innovative. And that means all different kinds of people. I do think that, being sincere, actually caring about people and liking people does make a difference. But I think that the economy crashing, prices going up, all these things are real effects that people are seeing. Because the man I ran against, he's not very inspiring at all, and he just really benefited from being an incumbent and being a Republican. But so in that case, we have some work to do, but I do think that maybe people are seeing that. Well, right, we're saying maybe Republicans, many of them are not going to change, but it's getting the reluctant voters, the people who didn't think it would ever get this bad. Oh, they don't need my vote. Yeah, and we need to make the case. We do need your vote. We do care. We do want to make things better. But in order to make things better, you gotta put some skin in the game too. If I'm spending thousands of hours volunteering and knocking on doors, you need to spend a few hours on a Tuesday or early voting and helping out. That's what we ask of you. And I think, that's what we're realizing. Democracy it's a participation activity, you know, and I think that we just need to run sincere people who care.
About that, I want to bring this back home to Indiana. So, when it was Wednesday, maybe, former Governor Evan Bayh, also a former senator, as well as another former Indiana Senator Joe Donnelly, were on Snyder Report with Gary Snyder, talking about the lessons that they were taking away from Tuesday's elections, and they were very quick to say, hey now, Indiana, don't come away with the wrong lessons. We don't want that kind of Mamdani stuff here in the Hoosier state. Now, I would say if we learned anything out of the wow, I'm bad as Cuomo trying to pronounce Mamdani's name. If we learned anything out of the Mamdani phenomenon this year, it's that Democrats reject legacy names with shady Republican funding sources.
Yeah.
I don't know. Am I reading too much into this?
Yes.
Yeah. Ross, do your job as the Democratic Party chair and smack me down.
Well, so look, Andrew Cuomo was a flawed guy. In many, many, many ways. So his problem wasn't that he was a legacy. His problem was that he was a scumbag. The legacy part didn't enter into it. I mean, if anything, the legacy would help him because his father was a great Democrat and a great governor. So yeah, I wouldn't. I know where you're at and I know where you're going, but I'm sorry. That part of it, the legacy part, I think, look, there are plenty of legacies that are fine. At the end of the day, it comes down to who you are and what you do, not what your name is. That may get your foot in the door, but listen, Eric Trump is a legacy, but I don't know that anybody's eager to vote for him for dog catcher. So no, I don't think I would read too much into that. I also don't know that I would take too much political advice from Joe Donnelly, who, in all due respect, um, really won an election in a perfect storm back in the
Yeah.
day.
He didn't win that election so much as Richard Murdoch lost it
Yeah,
by
well, I
being
mean,
heinous
the fact
tumult.
the
Yes.
fact that he was even running against Richard Murdoch was a miracle in itself, and then running against the guy who said God wants you to be raped is a pretty. So look, I got nothing against Joe Donnelly, good guy, very sincere, was a good senator, but taking political advice from him as to this is how you win in Indiana, not really. And I don't believe that we win by saying we're as Republican as the Republicans. I don't think that's ever been the case. We win by putting out our own vision and saying what we can do. And I certainly don't think that young Mr. Bai can't do that. He has every opportunity to do that. And look, I'm going to support the candidate who's going to win. I'm going to support the candidate that the party selects. I'm not going to immediately discount anybody based on he can't help it who his father is. But he's put his hat in the ring and he's going to make his case, and I'll let him make his case if he's able to. But again, I'll just disagree with anybody who says um, being cautious and um, be- being a Republican parrot is really what wins in Indiana. I think, as Leslie said, being sincere, um, you can be more conservative on some issues. We've seen plenty of conservative Democrats in this state who were great legislators and great leaders, but at the end of the day, it has to be because this is what we believe in and this is what our sincerity is. I don't think somebody in Scottsburg's probably going to run as a Democratic Socialist, right? But at the same time, I wouldn't say that somebody who is is a conservative Democrat is going to win in Bloomington. You know, we have to have a message of progress, of honesty, uh, of caring about people, and how we get there. You know, there's a number of ways to get there, but I'm not going to reject anybody for being progressive ever, because I don't know. I would not say that is a disaster in Indiana. We've seen it win too many times.
Leslie, final word to you. What's your big takeaway for Hoosiers after Tuesday night?
Hoosiers, we can do this, and we are still fighting for you. We are going to continue to fight for you, and we're all in this together. And I would like to say, if you have any curiosity as to what kind of music somebody who has run for office and cares about politics makes, I have a Kickstarter right now. It's under my name, Leslie Nuss. You can go and check it out. I've talked about the video that I made with you helped me make for Ticket to Mars, and yeah, I mean, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm making music as another way to keep people engaged. And I've been asked to run for office for next year. I was kind of hoping to take more than a year off. I'm still thinking about it. But regardless, I am supporting the blue wave that will come to Indiana.
Very good. What's that? You mentioned your music. What's the website so folks can find you? Where can the good people find Leslie Nuss online?
Well, they can find me on my website, which is leslienuss.com, and they can help fund my new project by going to kickstarter.com. And they can just, since I gave you a link, but they can search my name, Leslie Nuss, and they'll come up with my project. My new album's called Ride at Dawn, which is a song I wrote with a 17-year-old who is at the school that I do the music program with. And yeah, I've got some good, I think, inspirational songs on there to help people keep going. So thanks.
Well, thank you very much. Ross, how about you? Where can the good folks find you?
Barthdems.org. If you're in Columbus and want to get involved in politics, come see us. We got jobs for you.
Very good. All right. And the folks can find me online at whosleft.us. That is my handle on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads as well. On the others, it is at whosleft. Find me there, like, subscribe, do all the things, yada, yada. So until next time, I'm going to sign off. On behalf of our panelists this week, Ross Thomas and Leslie Nuss, I am Scott Aaron Rogers. I'll see you next time. Love each other, Indiana.
Yep. Thanks. Bye.